Hello! Another morning, another walk to my gym, and today I was going to talk to you about something that hurts me so much and I struggle with on a daily basis, and you will too, as long as you're doing any type of meaningful programming. This is going to happen, trust me. And I am, of course, as we all know, we're pretty well in basically I think we all can agree that we know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, pretty much. No? Okay. So what I'm talking about is that sooner or later you're going to find yourself wanting to build something for your company or your startup or like whatever you're building. You're going to find yourself wanting to build something that you want to build for yourself more than you actually want to build it to produce value for your users. Now, we actually had I had a very good example of this just yesterday, actually. So, me and my colleagues at my job, we're going through the coming quarterly, think of it as for those of you who aren't doing agile development and don't even know what that is, it's a workflow basically where you can do it in many different flavors. It's kind of like yoga. Everybody has their own definition of how to do it correctly. And in our case, we planned out the work that we're going to do for the coming months. One of the so-called stories or work packages from now on, I'm going to refer to them as stories because that's what we call them. But a story is just a feature or something that you're supposed to do. And when it's done, you take the next thing. So let's assume that you kind of had, I don't know, or rather in our case, we had roughly like 9 or 10 stories, right? And one of these stories is coming from one of my colleagues who works in ops, or like one of the guys who is more or less in charge of running the system on a day-to-day basis, making sure that, everything is working and making sure that if something happens with the servers, they are, immediately started up again and like all of that good stuff. He had a story that he had suggested, which was basically named, dramatically enough, logging and monitoring. Now, for those of you who have been through the pain and absolute horror of debugging a it's not exactly microservice, but let's to give this more of a dramatic flair. Imagine trying to run 4 different Kubernetes clusters with roughly, I think it's 7 containers or 7 Docker containers per cluster, right? And you need to debug all that goodness without proper monitoring or proper logging. Yeah, I know, it's a scary thought. It is a scary thought, I know. And it could be so much worse. So now that's not the exact truth, but of the matter that's the exact situation that we find ourselves in. But I'm trying to make a point here. So in his mind, or rather in all of the engineers' mind, I think it stands to reason that you would like to fix this, because it's what I call a nice to have thing. Even some people, like some of you might be watching this, would maybe even say that, hey, it's actually more important than that. Hey, this is business critical stuff. And I'd like to challenge that a little bit. I can't even believe I'm saying this, because I used to be that way. Like I used to, especially in the beginning of my own startup. I mean, I did everything wrong when it comes to prioritization. And I'll finish this little rant of mine with the big insight, the massive insight that I had. But let's get back to what I was saying. So he made the argument that he needed to take care of logging and monitoring. And then when I started asking him, okay, what specifically do you want to fix? Because logging and monitoring is like, it's a very large concept. I mean, how do you know? Like, you're not even specifying in your description of the story that you want to deliver what you're gonna log or what you're gonna monitor. And he kind of went, I don't really know. And so I said, okay, I'm sorry, my friend, like, I'm sorry. I would love to do this. I mean, as an engineer, I think this is interesting stuff. I think it's great that we could, if we could take some time and, really figure this thing out. But since you don't even know yourself what we're gonna do, how could we do it? How could you make a business proposition? Because as I said, or I told him, like, this is a business proposition. You are now taking time, development time, that could be put towards creating user value or, creating money for the company, towards maintenance, because this falls into the category of maintenance, and you don't even know what you're going to do. You can't, like, this is something that could take up all our time, or it could take no time. So I said, and this is me playing the devil's advocate, I said, why would you fix something we don't have an issue with? And he goes, well, it's very good to have, and like, it will help us, debug systems quicker and so forth and so forth. And I said, yeah, well, and I said, like, yeah, this is true. But we're doing that today. We are fixing these things today. And have you done the math? Have you looked at, have you had issues so far, checking the logs that we have today? Have you had a problem with them? Is there some reason where this is going to help us move faster, build things faster, or maybe it will give us clarity into something? And he said, well, no, not really. And the more I asked about his motivation for doing this, he finally arrived. He said, well, no, I just really want to do it. Boom. That's exactly what I thought. This is exactly the problem. I do it too. I've done it so many times. I am pretty sure you have done it too. If you it's gonna happen. If you're passionate about programming, you will sooner or later start building some stuff. You will convince yourself that you need this. And you need to stop it. Just stop it. I'm half talking to you and I'm half talking to myself here. Stop it. Just stop it, for the love of God. Because it takes so much time to build these things, and you make things more complicated, and you add a perceived value. But the thing is, the value that you are adding is, for the most part, just mental satisfaction. Because that's what it is. It's the same discussion I have with people who are obsessed with, being consistent, and everything needs to look the same way in the code because it should all look like one person wrote everything. And I kind of go, yeah, I can think that, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you have a code formatter or you have a linter or something, yeah, absolutely. You could add some value, I suppose, by having everything look the same way. But what's the problem? I would ask this, if you've ever watched one of my other videos where I talk about, or maybe I haven't even made that one. All right, whatever. The thought I have about these things is, okay, yeah, sure, you can have everything look exactly the same, but why would you sit for hours and hours and rewrite this, or whatever you're suggesting, or this perceived value, adding that to the project, when the code is still good? I mean, if the code isn't bad and it's not wrong, it's just not looking the way that you want it to look, what's the problem? Once again, this value that you're adding, there's no value, almost literally so little value that it's really only because of you. You are the one who wants, it's, as I said earlier, it's mental satisfaction. You're only doing this because it makes you feel all gooey and nice inside, and it scratches that itch you have in your brain. So the crescendo, the big insight that I had through this process that I went through, and which I'm trying to abide by today is that you need to let things be a problem before you solve them. Think of it as you can categorize things into nice to have and absolutely critical. Logging and monitoring a system is nice to have. It's not something that will, unless you have the real problems, like you are solving a bug. Like I did it myself just the other day. I was solving a notification integration in my own application, and I didn't have any logging and monitoring, so I didn't know if, you know, what was coming up from the database or what I was sending to the database. I didn't know what messages were going out to my mobile users, and I didn't know if they were received. That had never, for roughly a year now, that had never been a problem, ever. It just worked. And some would say that, hey, that's very negligible, like you're not maintaining your system correctly. And I said, and that's what I'm trying to say. I was. And now I had a problem because I didn't fix this. And so I added it in now. Because all of a sudden, the situation changed. Now I needed it. Do you see what I'm saying? It was theoretically possible for me to add it up front, but I wasn't in need of it at that point in time. Something else was more important. And that's the mentality you need to have. Add things that's absolutely critical. Never ever start indulging your mental desire to do things that are not absolutely critical.